Have you ever seen a problem that you wish you could fix, but you just didn't know how to fix it? Or maybe something in our country or something in the world that you'd love to change, but you don't know how to change it? Well, I got the answer for you today. Welcome to Journey at Home, where we create content that makes it simple for you to follow Jesus and live a better life. If you haven't yet, hit that subscription button and the bell for notifications because it helps other people see this helpful content. We are thrilled you're part of our community because better begins right here. That is our goal for you. Now, at the risk of sounding arrogant, I'm going to tell you how to fix all the world's problems. You ready? It's pretty simple. Everybody should just think like I think. That'd solve them all. And while we're at it, this would help too. Everybody should feel like I feel, and everybody should react the way I react. Problem solved. World's now a better place, well, at least for me. But I'm guessing you would disagree, right? You know how I know that? Because you think everybody ought to think like you think and feel like you feel and react like you react too. Now, don't deny it. I have proof that it's true. You fight with people, don't you? Yeah, we all do. See, this is episode 2 of our series, Love Money in the American Way, where we're discovering the leverage point that leads to lasting happiness in life. Now, a leverage point is a place in a system where one change can significantly impact and lead to positive change on an entire system. In other words, you improve one thing, it actually improves everything. So if you could only change one thing in your life that you were confident was going to make you happier, what would you change? Well, the American way is to change love, in other words, the quality of our relationships, or it's to change money. You know, we want to change how much we make, save, or spend. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, or you just want to remove him from the conversation, that approach makes a lot of sense. I mean, what else are you left with as a leverage point? But Jesus taught that he created us with a deeper, more impactful leverage point than just love or money. He said the greatest leverage point for happiness was actually our trust. The object of your trust determines the outcome of your life. Who you trust determines how happy you are. Because who we trust shapes the kind of relationships we have with each other, and it shapes the way we view and interact with money. And you get this. I mean, what's the biggest barrier to happiness in any relationship? It's conflict, right? And there is a connection between the conflict you experience with someone and who you're choosing to trust. Let me see if I can explain it this way. When you don't think, feel, or react like I do, it doesn't make any sense to me. And what do I assume? I assume you're wrong. After all, if I didn't think that I thought I was right, I would think differently, wouldn't I? But what does that attitude show me? Well, it shows me that I trust myself most. I trust my judgment, my intelligence. I trust my perspective. I am acting as if I'm the standard, which is why when you think, feel, or act differently than me, I tend to condemn, compare, or criticize you. I'll condemn you for being wrong. I'll compare you to somebody else who I think has it right. Or I'll criticize you for choosing wrong when you clearly could have chosen and should have chosen right. Now, here's the irony of all this. I know none of those responses actually make our relationship stronger. I mean, they're guaranteed conflict creators, which in turn is going to rob me of happiness. But I can't help myself because I trust myself to be the standard for what's right. So whenever you do something that doesn't make sense to me, it bothers me and I feel like I've got to mention it. Now, does that problem sound familiar to anyone? And maybe you made promises to somebody that you care about, or maybe you made promises to yourself. I'm going to stop comparing. I won't criticize you anymore. I got to quit pointing out all their faults. But as long as you trust yourself as the standard for right, you cannot keep from doing it. Fortunately, there is a way to shift your trust, to break out of this cycle of condemn, compare, and criticize. So in Jesus' most famous sermon, he addresses this very tension because he knew it was a problem for all of us. So here was the advice he gave us. This is found in Matthew 7:1. He said, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." Any married couples watching want to give an amen to that. I mean, it's so true, isn't it? Nobody has the ability and the ammunition to judge you like your spouse. They've seen you at your worst. They know all your flaws. So it's really easy for judging to become a habit in marriages. But the reality is we're guilty of it in all kinds of relationships. So let me define what Jesus meant by judge. To judge means to condemn. Jesus is not saying don't make moral judgments about anything or never confront somebody in love. What Jesus is saying is do not use your words to condemn or beat someone else down. How do you know when you're doing that? Well, when the focus shifts from whatever the problem is to the person, you're guilty. See, in every close relationship, you hold this extraordinary power in your hands to help or to hurt the other person, because your words and your actions, they carry weight. When you believe in that person, oh my gosh, it can propel them forward to do a lot of great stuff. When you condemn them, it can crush them. So Jesus says in your relationships, you had better learn not to judge, not to condemn the person who thinks, feels, or reacts differently than you. Because remember, your words are powerful. And then he gives us this warning. He says, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. In other words, you cannot expect people to hold you to a different standard than you hold them to. So if you wouldn't want to be condemned for something, don't condemn them. Let me ask you a simple question. How do you want to be judged when you are not the best version of you? When you fail, when you're impatient, how do you want to be judged? I know. You want mercy for your mistakes, don't you? So do I. You want the person to be understanding and forgiving. Well, Jesus said that whatever you throw out to others is what's coming back to you. The standard you hold others to is the standard by which you will be held. If you lack grace when you mess up, guess what? You better give grace, because you get what you give. Jesus went on to say, and with the measure you use, it'll be measured to you too. In other words, the way you compare is how you'll be compared. Now, Jesus isn't saying this is how we should treat each other. He's simply explaining how life works. Condemnation breeds more condemnation. Comparing breeds more comparing. People tend to mirror what they experience back to others, which feeds a negative cycle, and it fuels the conflict that robs us of the happiness we want. So how do you stop it? Well, I'll tell you, it's not the way you hope to stop it. See, I want the other person to stop the cycle. Jesus says, no, it's my responsibility. He asked this question. He said, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and you pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Now, I read that and I think, oh, Jesus, you got confused, because I do not have a plank in my eye. They do. I only have a speck in mine. I mean, my part of the conflict pie, it's just a little bitty slice, you know. I'm barely responsible. Of course, I shouldn't have said those things, but I wouldn't have if they hadn't compared me to my father-in-law. You know, I shouldn't have lost my temper, but they shouldn't have said that or judged me that way. That's why I criticized them. I mean, we are always certain the other person is a problem. It's because they don't think, feel, or react the way we do. So if they just clean up their problem, we wouldn't need to clean up ours, because everything would go the way we want it to go. But Jesus knew that attitude does not draw people closer together. It never resolves a conflict. So he asked this question. He said, how can you say to your brother, remember, he's talking about somebody you chose to be in a relationship with. This is somebody you wanted to have a friendship with that you're now in conflict with. He says, how can you say to them, let me take that speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? In other words, how do you think you have the moral authority to criticize them for what they did? Here you are pointing out specks in their eye when you got a sequoia tree in yours. And then you wonder why they get mad when you bring that thing up. Jesus goes, no, that's hypocrisy, and it's got to stop. If you want to learn to fight in a way that propels your relationship forward, you stop focusing on their speck, you start dealing with your own plank. Matter of fact, he gets pretty direct here. He says, you hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So you want to have great relationships? Focus on your planks before their specks. According to Jesus, if you reverse that process, you are being a hypocrite. You know what a hypocrite is. The word means to assume a role that isn't yours to assume. It is not your role or responsibility to change another person. It's your responsibility to love them. My job isn't to fix them. My job is to love them the way Jesus loves me. And until we make that shift in our relationships are going to suffer. The truth is, whenever you minimize your offenses and you maximize the other person's, you're just not trusting Jesus and his perspective on your relationships. You don't believe he's right. You believe you are. You're trusting yourself as the standard, not him. See, when he's the standard, you do not have any illusion that you just have a few specks in your eye. No. When you compare yourself to Jesus, come on. We all fall so short that nobody can deny we got a bunch of planks. But if I trust myself as being the standard of what's right and wrong, then I feel very free to wrongly condemn, compare, and criticize you. and then the relationship never thrives. So let me ask you, what's your plank? Let's be honest. Think about who you're in conflict with right now. If I ask you what the issues were in their life, in your spouse, your friend, your parent, your child, your sibling, your boss, your coworker, if I said, hey, what are the issues that need to change in their life? I bet you could rattle a list off to me without even thinking. But what are your big issues that are contributing to the conflict? Will you have enough humility to own them? Will you work on fixing you and stop trying to fix the people around you? Now, if you find yourself resisting that idea, that's a sign. It's telling you you don't trust Jesus. Your trust is in you as the standard to take care of things. And if I can push on that just a little bit, you're not actually trustworthy enough to trust. Neither am I. You don't always get it right. Neither do I. And Jesus says our condemning and comparing and criticizing, they're sin. Sin is anything you do that's not loving to the person across from you. Now, the good news is, Jesus chose not to condemn you in your sin. He chose to save you from it. That's what the cross is all about. He died for you and He died for me to prove to us that God doesn't feel contempt and criticism towards us. His goal's never been to pay you back for what you've done. It's to win you back with His mercy and His grace and His love, so that His relationship with you and with me will be restored. And guess what? You follow that example, you can experience that same kind of reconciliation in your relationships. So let me ask you again, what's your plan? Will you own it? Will you acknowledge it? Will you address it? If you will follow Jesus' example, if you'll show people the same mercy, grace, and love that He has shown you, you will be happier, and your relationships will be better.